Okay, design framework.
Roll.
That's the next thing we're doing today. So we've done the objects and elements, or elements and properties. We've looked at the spatial theme, and now we are getting into really the backbone, creating the skeleton of the backbone of the design. And this is one of the really, not really one of the most important part of setting up a design for success. So it supports the features that you'll include in your space and sets everything up to work with the site and work great. And there are four main things we'll look at. First is sight lines, balance, layered depth, and then scale and proportion. So sight lines and guidelines. Balance is really one of the main things for your entire design. And then we'll go through the next things too. So sight lines and guidelines. And this is what Chad pointed out. Then I think it was Jeff Anderson's he did the very first thing. And this is where you start. So you're okay, we've got a design, we've got a space we're going to design. How do we start to create and make something from nothing, from scratch, basically? And the very first step that I always do is I take not a computer. I'm always a big component of that. I start by hand, and I'll take the site plan. This is one that we did a month or two ago, a couple months ago, and we've got a draw the house. Basically, it's in CAD. We've got there the survey underneath. I take the drones. We've got the drone picture on top, and put that in CAD underneath, so you're able to see what the whole site looks like through here. And I've got the house with a house plan from the architect that's on there. And I'm looking first at, okay, what are the framing lines, or what are some of the things the site is telling me that I need to do? Start with what you know, and then listen to where it's telling you to go. So I've got in here, in the house, I've actually got the center line of the house comes out right through here where my mouse is going, but there did that thing that so many builders do, and it screws up everything. You can see it from the aerial above. They put a fireplace. Like, this is a great sight line that would be awesome view straight out into the backyard. But because architects only think about the house, not anything else, they put this big old fireplace right in the back, and it just kills the view. So my entire view now is just looking at a fireplace that you really want to look around it, but I can't. So that's not there.
Can I say something, Jason?
Yes.
Guys, I used to be a home builder, and we used to do design build for our homes. And one thing that if you guys can get on the project with the architect early on, or with a builder early on, that's always way better, because then they have time to change things. This is a great example of where I would say to an owner, hey guys, this is great. Okay, this is great that you have a fireplace. It needs to go on one of these sidewalls. The reason why is because it's going to absolutely kill all the view and all this whole corridor, which is a whole part of the house. It gets completely blocked by the fireplace. And Jason and I see it all the time in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to rip the fireplace out, and they just built it.
They've done that
to actually work.
Times.
So if you're on a project early on and you notice that, you should bring it up to the builder and the owner and say, hey, I know the architect has some great plans. It looks awesome. However, y'all need to consider this. It's not the end of the world, but it is. Sometimes it's really, it'll kill the backyard on some houses. This one, it's wide enough and long enough, and it's all good. But just think that early on, if they haven't started the house, bring that up to them, and just because the architect hadn't even thought about that, and the owner has not even thought about that, but y'all think about that. So you should bring it up at least, and not ruffle any feathers, but that way they know that, hey, we're looking at the inside of the house, and we're looking out. We want everything to look out to this beautiful outdoor living that we're going to design for you. Don't screw it up in the fireplace in the middle of it, or make it a double, like a see-through fireplace. It's early on enough in the process that can happen.
That's hard to make look good too.
It's the same house, actually. Mm-hmm. We just finished it yesterday at Dawkins, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there early enough that we're like, make it a see-through, and now we put a spa right behind it, and it's beautiful. But it's because we said it early enough on the construction side that they were able to change and switch gears and shift and still make it all work. So I just wanted to point that out. If you're involved up front, speak up.
Don't just be okay. That's what they said. So let have a voice. So yeah, that one they did. We ended up putting the spa right here, so the spa sits right at the fireplace and has a good tie-in, which is neat. So, but on this one, so we actually, so the main sight line is dead, but I've got a very good one that goes through the center of the house. That's the living room and the kitchen and the breakfast nook and the covered patio. So this becomes a key sight line that the site and house are telling me this is, I want to do something interesting out here. And same here. This is their Buffalo Wild Wings sports bar space. I mean, he's decking it out to be completely, thematic and make it his fun space. So this is including a double-sided bar here inside and out. So it's, we're hanging out TVs and the whole deal. So this is another big sight line that's coming out of the space.
That's a garage roll-up door.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
And then they've got a big barn off to the side with a cupola and some gabled ends. So that's coming out, and that's a big sight line then. So I've got a center line that's coming off here. So I've got some guidelines and sight lines to start with what the site is telling me to do. I want something big here. I want something big there. I'm, probably going to be symmetrical because I've got the very symmetrical barn coming across here, so it gives me a good reason to have a mirror line in this case. And then those are my sight lines. I also put in when I draw it out in like very small dots and small arrows. I'll put these are guidelines that are coming out the more minor windows of the house. Like this is a guest bedroom. So boom, I want something. It doesn't have to be a major prominent feature, but there's a view coming out here. So I don't want to just hide it. I don't want to ignore it. And I'll put them sometimes at the end of the house. So I've, got kind of some almost like snap lines they would in a computer, where you've got some things you want to line up. Another view out from the sort of the dining space of the covered patio, not a major one. And since I don't have a good view out because of the fireplace, I have filtered views off to the left and right side. So I put some guidelines out to that side. And then the master bedroom is sort of almost in between a sight line and not. It's a bedroom, so it's not access, but it is a very important view. So I've got that still is pretty important. So now I can kind of see where this is starting. And I'll have to show this later. I don't think I put this in the slide, but where I built off of this. But you can kind of see I've got some lines to start saying this is what's important and this is what we can do. So this is a really good starting point with sight lines and guidelines. And you can also, let's say if there's a really big, interesting tree right here. This is a prominent space. It's going to make or break the thing. I'll do sight lines off that, like come down towards the house or do a 45 or, come in at a 90. So where I'm going to be able to see it, especially from my view corridors, are going to come into play. And that's going to be an important part of the design. So that's sort of step one. And now I'm starting to build a frame that says, how do we create something interesting? This is going to play balanced. Can't go wrong with Karate Kid. Can y'all hear this? Okay. So every time he says karate, replace that with design.
Feed in, feed out. And no scare fish. Balance. Balance is key. Balance good. Karate good. Everything good. Balance bad. Let a couple of months. Understand?
Yeah, I understand. You want to get in fights with me? Yeah, but it wasn't like a problem I have, right?
Why? Fighting. Same.
Yeah, but you knew karate.
Someone always know more.
There were times when you were scared to fight.
Always scared. Never hate fighting.
Yeah, but you like karate.
Oh,
So karate's fighting. You train to fight.
that's how you think.
Like over my job.
No.
They quite trained.
So I won't have to fight.
Yeah, we have a hope for you.
When am I going to have a punch?
Now punch. Learn how to grind.
All right. Mr. Miyagi, wisdom about design. That's some of you may be too young for that.
Like, who's next for me?
And I've never heard of the guy. I know. So, or whatever came out with a series now, the redo series, but
It's never going to be like the old.
I know it's not the same. Correct.
It's okay.
Balance is the most important thing that you can have in your design. If your design isn't balanced, it's going to fail. And that's the key to, if you see a space that's not balanced, your eye moves on. I'm out. I'm done. So, and there are different ways to achieve balance, but balance is key. It's kind of go back to the point I was making there. So the statement, better learn balance. Balance is key. Balance is good. Design is good. Everything is good. Balance is bad. Better pack up and go home. It's not going to happen. So, balance is the way that all the elements are arranged to create a big visual equilibrium, like two sides of a scale. You can do it symmetrical or asymmetrical. Doesn't matter. They each have different properties that it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, whether you try to go symmetrical, asymmetrical, but it's an intentional choice. But really, as soon as you go to a space, your brains immediately make a judgment. Do I like it or does it feel wrong? And it's almost always based on, is it balanced? If it's unbalanced, spaces are uncomfortable and it almost feels like it's going to fall apart or something. You move on. You don't stay in an unbalanced space. Another point about how our brains work and think, you see, as soon as you enter a space, your brain makes an instantaneous decision. Do I like it or not? And we see the whole thing before we start making up the parts of the whole. It's that emergence is one of the Gestalt keys I teach in the advanced class, the design psychology. And if the very first thing you enter a space and it's not balanced, then you immediately, I hate it. So if you have to get balance right is your number one piece in any design. It is one of the more difficult concepts to achieve. So it's not something that just automatically lines up in a lot of cases. You have to fight for it and you have to really understand it. And that's where doing some of these guidelines and sightlines helps you create that. And we're actually going to talk about a different way to do it, especially asymmetrically than what most people do. It sets the stage for the entire design.
Go back to the last picture, Jason.
Yeah.
Explain what is balance that's not obvious.
So this is Danny Wang's project right here. And he's coming down and you can basically see the sight line coming right down the middle. There's nothing that shows a line there, but you can, right back. There we go. You can see what it's doing. It's coming straight down the middle with a implied line. And balance is basically everything on the left is equal, and with symmetrical balance, it's typically matchy. Like as I'm coming down here, I've got a water bowl on the left that's matched by the one on the right. I've got a big palm tree on the left, it's matched by the one on the right, matched down the line through here. So it's a center line. The pavers are exactly the same. So that is symmetrical balance down that line. Now, you don't have to be 100% matchy because then it gets boring over time. But in this case, he had a building right here that had visual weight on the right side down that side. So he needed something on the left side.
Exactly.
If this building is strong right here and there's nothing on the left side, then the space is unbalanced. And what happens immediately is your eye is going to go to the void. If I'm looking out here and you can, put your hand up and like hide the wall with the fountains and everything on the left and act like that's not there, your eye is going to go to where that is anyway, because it's going to try and find that balance. And then you just get lost up in here somewhere and you don't even look at the center line and what's happening. You're trying to figure out what's going on with the trees in the distance, because that's just all your brain is telling you to find the balance, and it isn't there. So that's what.
So one of the things, real quick, one of the things that I've learned when Jason and I started working together is I had a job that he had designed, and I randomly let the owner cut out the cabana on the far right side. Well, because I was just trying to, oh, if that's what you want to save some money, that's great. Well,
I forgot about that, Joe. Yeah.
yeah, that we need to go get a picture of their project
Or not.
and use it for
I
this.
know.
But
What
anyway,
happened?
what happened is so there was a cabana on the right and everything was balanced in the design. Well, I allowed them to just save money and take that out. And when you look in the backyard when it was all done, it was your eye, because there was no cabana with any vertical structure on the right, which needed to balance everything from the left. Your eye just went straight over it into La La Land, into the woods. And I never ever realized it until it was done. But the owner just wasn't going to pay for it. But I should have said, no, you need to go talk to Jason, because that's balance. That's going to throw all the balance off. And I just didn't know better. But I've learned that that's exactly what he's talking about. And if this building was not there and you just wanted to go ahead and put this big water feature on because that's what the owner wanted, it would kill the backyard, because then you would go
the other way. Yeah,
that's
right. Your eye is just kind of going off. What's happening over here? Or is there a lawnmower? I don't know what's happening. It's right. Nothing makes sense.
Yep. All right, go ahead.
So another example. This is a Ryan Hughes, one of his famous over-the-top versions here. Coming straight out the house, symmetry line. You draw a line right down the middle. All the objects on one side are mirrored on the other side. So you've got the big fire bowls and the circles. So everything's the same, all throughout the space right here. So that's symmetry. So symmetry is fairly easy to do because you just have to take it and flip. Although it can be, it's very, I guess I'll say European, the Italian garden style. It can be boring. So it's traditional and it's, whatever. You have to fight to find ways to make it interesting instead of just being a mirrored flip of the same shape over and over again. But to the point we said before, this is a symmetrical balance and it is matchy, but the house is not 100% symmetry. Like I've got more going on the right side than I do on the left side. And I've got this planter here on this side because the house extends further. So my steps are further away. So I have to do something. So I still end up with a palm tree on this side that isn't mirrored on this side. But the moral of the story, or the heart of it is, because you've got the curved radius steps coming down, the curved radius steps coming down. So it doesn't have to be exact, but it still tries to match, especially the closer you are to the center line. You want those items to be mirror flips of each other. Okay. Another thing on symmetrical balance, you'll have your axis line. In this case, on the bottom picture here, it's coming across through there. And you'll have a cross axis line as well. Something that's going at a perpendicular line across the middle. In this case, you can see it right here. Remember that center line is coming. The steppers take you across there. And that ends up going, we'll study this picture later this evening in further depth in the case study. So it goes on, and then there's another whole pool and space over here that cross-axis line works with. So you don't just have to be stuck with one line. Boom, that's it. You can have a cross-axis line, and then that extends further, and then you could have another cross-axis line off that one that extends out and further. So you can kind of build this, Scrabble puzzle basically of how all the spaces work using your mirror lines.
Hey, Jason,
Yeah.
go back one. Another one. Explain if this is symmetric or asymmetric.
This is symmetry completely. So because you've got
with an offset balance.
Yeah, well, it's still a symmetrical balance because it's balanced there. Once the further you get away from the center line, then you can still they don't have to match. Like, it's still symmetrical because
But it's because of the strong center line.
Correct.
And the trees and how it goes off to the, yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I try and teach and push there is stay out of the middle. Designs that put the primary objects directly in the middle of the design space lack interest and creativity. You'll push you to make sure you don't put your pool down the middle. What most people do is they'll take a sight line out and it'll be trying to do a symmetrical design and they'll just plop the pool right down the middle of that line and then start trying to build out. And that can be a negative or a detriment to the case. So or it depends on which way you're trying to do, but that's one of the main things. Keep your mirror lines or your intersections. Don't just put them in the dead center of the property. Offset them at a 1/3, 2/3 point, and always at 90-degree angles. So this is one I did, and you can kind of see the cross, the very strong axis line goes right down through the middle. The cabana ties in here and connects through here, but it's not in the center of the yard. It's like the center is more here once you look at how much space we've got. And then I've got a cross axis line that's connecting into the fire features come off the house and the symmetry and ties in. But it makes it where really when you're in the space, it's more prominent. The patios and the overlook and the element starts to be where your center is, because they're a little bit extended out and play in. So
why did you put the deep well on that right side? Why did you put it at a 45?
Right here?
Yes.
Why it's a octagonal piece. Yeah, boom, 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 boom. Because I was playing with the shapes that are there, and it's a very Italian, almost like Roman style piece. So if I just squared it, it would be boring on that end, and I didn't want to make it a circle. So and I played it, and then you can see in the bottom, I played the tile lines have the 45-degree angled space in there too.
Right.
And I played that same. I cut these corners to give me some angles on these spaces too, so it's not just a box. No, opened up to be more interesting. No. Symmetrical designs don't have to be classical. You can do modern symmetry. Here's an example. I don't know who this Jacques Bethke. I'm not sure who that is, but actually saw several of his works, and I think he's an architect. But very symmetry, but look at the materials used and the big open arcing. It's a very contemporary space using a high symmetry line. So it doesn't mean you have to be classical or very traditional to use symmetry. Asymmetrical is the opposite. It's still balanced, but it's balanced in a different way. I am a huge asymmetry fan. Most of the jobs I do have an asymmetrical balance, which I love. You place non-identical elements across the design in ways that appears to have equal visual weight, but if it's done correctly, it feels natural and unimposed. It can be more difficult to achieve, but it's often a very much more interesting design. In this example, an overhead is oftentimes a great way of a drone shot to see symmetry. And this, I picked this picture because you literally have something sort of dividing down the middle, so you can see that the space is divided, but it's not an axis line because you're not doing anything that's matchy left and right. It's not a symmetry, but I've got visual weight. All the things on this side feel equal and balanced to the things on this side, but nothing looks or is the exact same. It's two completely different things, but that balance comes into play, so it still feels balanced and weighted. It's not an obvious, and oftentimes the non-obvious is the best way to do it because it's not staring at you and saying, hello, look at me. It just naturally happens. Asymmetry can be very artistic. It can seem natural to the viewers. You can't really tell this is a man-made stream. This is Lawrence Halpern. I've got a picture of it later. It's really cool with all the different, I think I had one earlier as well, but all the different basically boxes and the water breaks off of them different. It's really cool. So this is an example that I use oftentimes to show how you can use different materials and different shapes to achieve balance in an asymmetrical form. It's called counterpoints. So I've got on my right side, I've got a center line down the middle, boom, 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 and there's nothing on the left that matches the stuff on the right, but they're still balanced out completely. So, and look at all the different ways. Quantity on the right, it's one single large shape. On the left, there's a bunch of small boxes, so it's different, but they balance themselves out.
So is it balancing itself out, Jason?
It's balancing because of all the different things that are different about it. The shape is different. So the circle is different than the square. They're kind of the exact opposites of each other.
But is it because of the mass of the circle taking
Correct.
up almost the same mass as what's to the left?
Yeah, it balances out.
Spatial wise.
The scale of the circle on the right is counterpointed by the multiple small squares on the left. You don't have to, if I put a big circle on the left, I don't have to have a small circle on the right. It can be very different materials. Texture. This one is, smooth and shiny, and the other is, rough and textured for the small ones. It's identical. There's nothing that's the same left and right, but they're balanced because they're the opposites or the counterpoints of each other. So another good way to show that how you can balance out accordingly. And this is sort of the epiphany moment that a lot of people start to understand balance, especially asymmetrical balance. Is there's so many of the framework principles that I pull from photography. And we, typically know if you're a photographer at all or do stuff, you don't just want to do like selfie. You just, put yourself in the center, put a person in the center of the frame. It looks terrible. So that's not how anyone wants to do. You always put your subjects on that thirds line, rule of the thirds. You divide your space into the tic-tac-toe grid. And you do a top third and bottom third and left third and right third. And then you line up the horizon, in this case, on the top third. And you line up the little girl on the left third that's through here. And you start to use that as your grid that lines up that creates the composition of your space. Look at a few other pictures in here. Same thing. In this case, the horizon is the bottom third line, and the tree is the right thirds line. And then I'll come back to this in a minute, but the sunset is hitting, boom, almost perfectly at the point, the intersection point of the grid right there. And the kayaker, same thing. The water line or the lake line is right there at that bottom third. His body is kind of lined up on that right third, but with the kayak paddle, it's hitting, boom, right at the other third, at the fulcrum where his shoulder is one half and the paddle is the other. That's a very strong composition of space. So you can use these same tactics in space design, which is really cool when you start to see that, when you don't really know how to start a setup and have good lines to do an asymmetrical space. If you take this same grid and lay it down on top of your space, all of a sudden things starts to make sense of where if I put something in my top right here, then what is on my bottom left? And it makes me stay out of the middle when it's that way too. You have to consciously make an effort to keep your central feature out of the middle or off center. But when you line things up, just like you do with a photograph with your thirds lines, then it lines up. It does that automatically for you. Some more examples. The pile of rocks is the right side, and then gets up to where it sort of hits the sky in that spot, and the center spot is on that one, and then the sun is hitting at that bottom left. So that's a strong composition. If you move that over right down the middle, it's a boring picture. So same thing, you kind of just little details of the wood lines and the flower hits at a space, how with the shell, the sight lines, the top third, the waves are hitting at the bottom third, and the shell is lined up on the right. It's a strong picture. So let's look at that. If we overlay a grid on some of these same sort of spatial spaces that we saw from the beginning, where go back and let's take another thing that I'll show on here too. You see where it lines up here. You can have your thirds line through here. I've got something interesting that's hitting in that top left third space right there. And then I'm counterpointing that over here in the deck. It doesn't have to be exact, but in that ballpark space, I've got another tree and thing that's hitting in here. So these make some good space, and I've got another tree in space that's hitting in this one. But what it's doing is putting my interest points on the outside of the middle, and then I'm able here to use some different things that are coming in, fill the voids with the shapes that my spatial theme are telling me to do. On the circular design, same kind of an idea. I put the grid line on top of it, my tic-tac-toe board, and I've got I've got kind of this the fountain space here with the bubbler in the middle. That's kind of hitting at an important space, saying this is my bottom left third's counterpoint or point. So I'm counterpointing that with a big tree that's that space on the right there. And look, the sort of the fulcrum or the main space of the where the pergola and the bigger pool come together, that's hitting it another third. But it leaves the center open, is not the main piece, which is nice. And then I'm going with some circle steps out and sort of radiating out and tying into those spaces. From a diagonal standpoint, same type thing. We've got different patio spaces, and where this is hitting on that third line right here with a tree and a planter space, it's dividing the space and making that come into play. It's working in that a good space to get where it's not just filling the middle with the main piece. Your arc and tangent, same thing, really strong center line coming on your third space right here. The bubblers right there become that key space, and then it's counterpointed with the planter up on the left. And this planter it's pushed a little bit to the right, but same idea, that it's getting that space becomes the centerpiece there. So we're keeping it where, using this grid line, when you lay it down on a plan view, it becomes it sets yourself up for a far more interesting space. Quickly do a few more there, but the fountains that are here, so everything's lining up, and the rectilinear space there, this is kind of closer to that line, offset what's happening in some different thirds, and same on the angular space. The fountains over here off of that left, and the steps are coming down to the weird steps are here, the middle's over there, so it keeps all the things out of the middle and makes an inherently more interesting, asymmetrically balanced space. So that's the keys to to balance, both symmetrical and asymmetrical. The next thing we're going to look at is layered depth, is creating the foreground, middle ground, background elements to it. And this is it's getting in the weeds or getting deep into the structure of it, but this is where the design really takes off. And it's another aspect we take from photography. So we're layering it like in a picture. Any picture you see, you've got something typically is your main subject in the middle. And then oftentimes, I need to add some pictures to this slideshow too. I don't have that, but you'll have something in the foreground that grounds you, that brings you down, that says, pay attention to me at the bottom of the space. It'll have a very neat texture or something really cool that ties in. So that's your foreground element. And you've got your midground, which is typically your main part of whatever your elements you're trying to and have. And then you'll have a background space or element. In this case, this is one of Ryan Hughes's couple of years old design that he did. But it's got in the background, it's got something that's drawing you out through here. In this case, it's the rain, the circular rain piece that's coming down that, boom, this is drawing your eye, and it's taking your eye on a journey that says, I'm coming in here, I'm using my foreground pieces or my fireballs here. They're taking me out over the fire pit seating in the center with a fountain, and then it's taking my eye out here and then lets it come back and then circle back in and tie in. So it's taking your eye on a visual journey when you're considering, as you lay out, I want something in my foreground, I want something in my midground, and I want something in my background. And what those are up to you and your design. It adds visual depth and layers the design frame. So it takes your eye on a journey. But it's all based on having defined viewing locations, which you should do anyway. But you really design based on, this is where I want you to stand. This is the main view that out of as soon as the homeowner opens their back doors to the back patio, this is the view that I want to boom. So I have, it's a key spot. So I'm going to frame that view with something in the foreground, something in the midground, and something in the background that's going out. So we're looking at how the layers interact and how to make good depth to the space. When you have a foreground piece, and this is one that Chad and I did a year ago, less, or this spring, I think.
Yeah.
A foreground piece, if you're looking at it through here, is the fire pit. So, and it made a unique fire pit. It's typically something in the foreground that's not a major. It's not the main piece. It's an appetizer. It's setting the stage for what's going to come in the distance, a jumping off point. So this is where you can start to, you feel comfortable stepping out into the space, and it's giving you a reason to join in. It can be an intricate detail. In this case, it was a fire pit that's kind of a cross or or a clover, or however you want to look at it. They're just a different type of fire pit coming out. And then looking at the space, my mid-ground was kind of the main space of the pool and the spa that we're tying in and making this is kind of the guts of the space. And then my background is the lake and the distance and what's happening out there. So, but it ties all three of those together, and I'll show that in a few more pictures as well, considering that this is one of the main viewpoints sitting at the house and then coming out through there.
So I have a question on
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talked about balance earlier, and I'm looking at the little cabana house over there,
Mm-hmm.
how do you explain the balance on this one?
There are trees to the left right here. You can see it right there.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the cabana becomes and it's really almost like the fisheye as you're looking out from it, where it's going, you're expanding out right here. There's some big existing trees right up here to the left. So having this cabana serves as a balance factor to what's happening on that side over there. And it's also framing your view to really send your eye down then from like making sure that's creating the right vista. So it's not just if that's not there, if you just take that space away, then your eye is going to go way over here to the right, and it's not going to frame out over the pool.
Right.
So I'm trying to intentionally do that, but it's a very good point. Okay, that's here in the picture. You're right, doesn't show that, but you can kind of barely see it on the edge. That there's a big tree right here. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Yep. So the visual strength of the foreground is very important, but just because you put an object in the foreground does not make that object interesting. You need to give that object a lot of detail, a lot of texture, some depth, some contrast, some things we're going to talk about in just a minute that you can add that foreground element. That's what makes it, ooh, that's kind of a cool little thing you're looking at. And then once you're out to that foreground piece, then the rest of it opens up and you see a different view. The mid-grounds is the middle, obviously, makes sense. It serves as sort of the main course or the main space where you put your high use features typically. And this is a term we'll start talking about now. I'll explain it a lot more tomorrow or Tuesday. We have another class. There's inward facing designs and outward facing designs. An inward facing design is when you've got a space there's nothing spectacular in the distance. It's just, it's a fence, it's a neighborhood, it's houses behind it. There's nothing that says, hey, look at me in the distance. So in your design, you want everything to face inward and do something so strong that it keeps you locked in to the space that you're creating and doesn't let your eye try and wander off into the distance and look at the second story neighbor's house and the power line off to the left or whatever it is. So that's a inward facing design. Reverse of that is an outward facing design. And when you have an outward facing design, you've got something that is magnificent. It's God shining his glory in the distance. And this one's one I did in Arkansas that had the lake and the hills in the distance and it just went on and on forever. This is like, wow. Okay. Well, I don't want to do anything in my mid-ground or in my design that will distract from what's happening in the distance, from what God's doing. If I say, no, look at me, don't look at that, look at me and do something that's so strong right in here, then I'm fighting. And who's going to win? God always wins. Don't wrestle with God. It's like a spirit. But he's going to win. This is amazing. What I do here is nice. But if I didn't do anything that put a sculpture here and a big fountain feature or something that said, look at me, look at me, look at me. I did a 360 spill over a sheet of glass and did a Lautner edge and made it where it just mirrored and reflected the sky. So it became this, oh, look at that. But really, ooh, look at that. So that was the goal in here. So that's an outward facing design. And that's where you start to think here what to do in your midground. If your midground is outward facing, you don't want to do anything super. If it's inward facing, this is where you put your stuff that says, hey, look at me. This is the kind of lock me in the middle and go from there. So yeah. I think I mentioned this, like borrowed scenery. That's a term. I was just in Japan a few months ago, and that's a huge part of the Japanese garden where they're using something. I think I mentioned it here in a minute. So, yes, the next slide. There you go. They use it historically. Japanese gardens have used the natural scenery, the distance, the volcano, the mountain, the river, the whatever it is. It's not part of your space. It's part of God's space in the distance, but you're designing with that as a key element of the design, and that's what we're doing here too. I mean, especially sunset on this job we looked at earlier. Oh, I mean, that's the show. This great, very nice. But if I did something here that was, did a sculpture and a fountain and blow whatever, I mean, why? This is where I want to look. This is what's really special out here. So they would kill it. So I'm borrowing the scenery that's back there to make it happen. So in the background, and that's, I think, basically saying the same thing, just now looking at it from a third point of view, the stuff that's furthest away. Actually, on an inward facing design, the background is subservient to the midground. You want it to actually sort of be this tree line that then makes your eye kind of come back around. Something that says, yeah, this is basically just, it keeps you grounded and keeps your eye to move back towards the center. But on an outward facing, that's the show. That's what you want to see. So I put these slides together on the plane today, but so just to show, kind of to further illustrate the point of some of the same pictures we just looked at, the one from Ryan earlier. This is my foreground space. I've got something small, something detailed, something unique that says, hey, this is the enter. It's at the bottom. It's kind of the main, space where you enter, go, and that's my foreground element. My midground in this case is really the hangout space, the fire pit surrounded by water and the fountains and the whole deal. This is kind of the thing you're really looking at. But this is a inward facing. There's nothing spectacular in the distance. It's got lit up trees and it's nice. But we've got, so instead he's putting to add some depth back here, a big piece that says, hey, kind of this is where we're looking, but it's also it's kind of circling your eye back around into here. And it doesn't hurt this lazy river, but still it's kind of visually your eye goes to here, but it doesn't then go get lost further in the distance. It's circling back around and into the midground, into the key feature of the space. So here's another one we did last year as well. Similar thing. We've got our foreground is, in this case, the spa and the play. More simple, not over the top on this one. The foreground is the spa space. It's in here. It kind of grabs your eye and the angles hit you from your viewing location. The midground was really the structure that we created. That was purpose of it. When you're looking at from another angle, it hides the neighbors, and it's a huge hill that you're staring at all the neighbors back here. But the background space is one you want to look at. In this case, it's kind of where everything falls off in the distance. It's an edge pool that spills down from a different view, but it's at night. You see all the neighbors below and a little bit of a hill, and it creates a grid space. And what it's really doing, just like the other, is taking your eye on a journey. You're going here, bouncing to the midground, then going right to the background and letting your eye go into the distance in the space, which you want it to in this case. Back to this one again, the foreground. the furniture. Furniture is a great way to bring some foreground element into it, some texture, some pillows, some colors, some things that tie in. The midground is kind of the pool and the edge detail, especially with the Lautner and the sun hitting at night and the mirror that it creates. But the background is the sunset over that huge mountainous expanse, and the lake in the distance was awesome. But you kind of see visually, your eye starts here and just goes that fish eye just expands out both left and right and takes you all the way from the mountain on the left, pinnacle peak on the left, to the sunset on the right. Another point I was going to make on this same two pictures in a row here. This is that same project, but I've got multiple viewing locations that it's interesting from. So I've got from the front of the house, which actually will go here, was one we showed before, where the fire pits, if they're standing here, that's my foreground element. And then the pool is my midground here, and the distance is my background there. So it's a little bit more like boom, then kind of left and then right, and it's taking me on a journey here. But on a space design, it's not only spatial design, it's not only meant to be seen from the back of the house coming in. We've also got it off to the left side, basically the corner. You go down these steps and corner pool. This is another great view. So this became a secondary viewing location that I created a space where I've got a foreground element, still kind of something that's inviting me into the space, still have a midground, still have a background. It's a little different, but I've got multiple layers from multiple different locations. And it becomes a game of, like chess or, where it's building as you're doing this stuff. So that's a key factor of foreground, midground, background. Everyone understand that? Thoughts, questions on it? The next thing we'll talk about is scale and proportion. This is the fourth of the issues, or the framework sections, the last of it. And this is a huge thing that comes into play on a lot of different projects too, that I see as a big mistake that a lot of builders primarily make, and not thinking through size and relationships. Scale and proportion. So by definition, scale is how the size of one object in a space relates to the size of the other objects in the same space. And proportion is not the same thing as scale. Proportion is the different sizes of individual parts that make up an object. So in using a pool, but comparing the size of inside the pool, the size of the sun lounge is in relation to the size of the spa, in relation to the main body of water. Those are proportional relationships. They're parts of the pool that make up the pool, and you want to have that the right spatial sizes within that to make it work. Scale is when you compare the size of the pool to the size of the hardscape, to the decking, to other things that are outside that make up the overall design, not just the part of the whole. Those are scaled relationships between all the different subjects, how they work together in the design space. Like here, the proportional relationship would be the sun lounge and the spa and how it sits in proportion to the body of water. Scale would be, how is the pool scaled against the size of the covered patio pavilion, against the size of the deck, against the size of the house. Hey, how about you?
This is my neighbor across the street's house.
Yep. So one of the first times,
awful.
It's terrible. So, but so typical. And so this is actually how Chad and I met. Got 10 years ago. He brought this homeowner brought me out to look at what can we do with this space. He bought the house, and it's a big ass house. I don't know how many feet this is. So it's 20,000, 10,000, 12,000 feet. Yeah,
it's probably 10.
Yeah, 10,000 feet square foot house, big old house. So they've got all that, and they just put in a 18 by 38,
a puddle,
3 bubble no
trouble. A puddle.
a puddle. Yes.
I'm gonna tell them. Puddle.
That's right. So the scale is all wrong. And then to fix that scale, when they did it, well, they just sort of, well, let's just put some decking, and the decking is massive. I mean, it's like you're in, hello, hello,
Yeah,
hello,
you're at car
hello.
dealer lot. Yeah.
Yeah, going over there, and it's all just pavers and stuff. Everything is out of scale, and they've got this, multi-million-dollar home. It's, really nice place, and talking about doing some stuff to it, and the pool being so out of scale with the space just kills it. So it kills the whole element. But it's a normal size pool, quote unquote, normal size pool. But if you go back and you think about where my sight line is coming out of the house, draw a sight line. Yeah, it's centered in a pretty good spot, coming out through here. But I've also got a sight line that's here, and I've got a sight line that's over here, and I've got a sight line that's coming out over here, and I've got all these other sight lines that are coming out that they're just going to the void because whoever put the pool in just decided, well, that's the size pool you do. So,
And you put it out 75 feet from the house, and we'll just fill it in with papers.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So you end up with this just out of scale space that he's been talking for. He still hadn't done anything with it. We had him in the office like a month or two ago, and he's like, "What can we do?" It's like same thing we told you 10 years ago to do, and you hadn't done it. So, but
Bless him.
yeah, lesson learned. But so that's a big part of that is you don't have to keep everything as just 20 by 40, and it break the mental thought of this is how big a pool needs to be. And you can have swim space, or maybe it's the water is the connector between the two, or the spa sits over here, or you put a sun lounges. It doesn't all have to be 3.5 to 8 foot depth, and there's a lot of ways to skin a cat and make it interesting. But taking it into different sizes and scale is a big issue. So, another thing to consider is human scale, the size of an object based on relation to us as people. Very important. How you experience the space should be comfortable, no matter how large or small the space is. One thing I always do when I'm designing space, I start, especially patio spaces, I start with the furniture layout. I don't draw the lines of the patio and then try and make the furniture fit inside of it. I want to draw the furnishings out and then draw a line on the outside of that so that I've got good spatial constraints. And it's like I'm shoving things in. I ran out of room. So the deck chair is falling off the back. There's no room to get around it because we didn't make it big enough. But if you consider your furniture layout first, then the rest of the space starts to come in, and you start to think, okay, I'm going to have a seating space right here. This is cool. That's going to turn into a thing. And then I know that, especially this is an, overflow edge. I wanted all the sun loungers to be at that space. So that became, the loungers came first, then the patio lines drew around it. The fire pit on this side, made sure I had plenty of seating space around it and everything before I drew in how all the rest of the spaces work. So don't try and adjust your furniture to fit the space that's already there. And I have to tell this story. This is one, I had a horrible employee several years ago, just didn't get anything of what he was doing, and tried to get him to, learn and think. And he, God bless him, but he did this. He had a design I was trying to get him to do and show the patio spaces and whatever else. And it was literally, he was just doing the presentation, getting it ready for a client presentation. And I get there and he puts the furniture in, and the furniture is like way over scale for the space that he made the decking. I was like, that doesn't work. It's not, it's the furniture's on top of each other. Everything's going to be, you need to make that bigger, make the furniture work in there. But for him to make the furniture work, it was in Pool Studio because he wasn't thinking right. He just took it and scaled the furniture down to like Barbie size.
It works now.
It works now. And he came back in ready to present it to a client and whatever. I'm like, what the hell are you doing, Adam? Come on. Oh, so how are you going to sit in that? What are you going to do there? Well, I didn't think about that. So he got fired shortly after. So, but human scale matters. So make sure you build off of the human scale.
So what was that style, Jason?
Right here.
Angular, or I was ask a question. Angular or
Not
architecture?
angular. It's so okay. It's fair
Good
point.
question.
Fair point. Once you know the rules, you know when you can take the rules and massage the rules and break the rules a little bit. So it's a little bit of a it's a little rectilinear through here, but I did put some diagonals to open things up and make it feel, especially in here. I've got a grotto that comes underneath, and you swim up underneath the kind of Venetian bridge, very European style through here. But I actually played with it and did some circle spaces into it too. This is kind of like Bellagio fountain. It's got a center line and then rings around, and the tile go there. So I didn't want that to be angular, but I didn't want the whole thing to be circular or architecture, because I wanted some formality to it. So this one's a blend, and it's a good point you say that. What I'm teaching, heavy when I'm saying on the exercise we did earlier, and what we'll talk when we do our project, I'm hitting hard on be extremely consistent to every last line, be circle, 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 circle. That doesn't mean that a project that isn't that way isn't a success. It makes it far better to start that way and get that point. And then if you change something for a reason intentionally, kind of like Danny Wang did in the LASIK eye pool, it broke the rule of don't put acute angles in there, but it was for a reason. In this case, it's kind of got rectilinear spaces, but it's also more diagonal than probably anything else because of all the corners are cut and through here. But I put a circle in there because I didn't want to
The circle ties in with the stairs too.
Yeah, and the steps off the house are circles. I'm pulling some different elements and finding some different things. So,
and I like how the planters are filling in those the gaps of what the design.
Right here, yeah, I'm huge. We'll talk more about this later too. I am a huge fan of poolside landscape planters. Does anyone use those? Not use those? Most pool designers, don't do them. And
they just throw down a big old deck. Yeah,
I know, and I never. And Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I don't know that I have ever put a pool completely surrounded by deck on the same plane.
I doubt it.
I know, ever. Like I always bring something up to an edge, or take it where I'm puncturing or coming across, or in this case, I've got it's a vanishing edge on this side, so a lower basin. So I'm bringing in a different plane, so that's coming in. But I love to bring the landscape up to it and soften it and bring that earth element that comes in.
Yeah,
huge part of design. Yeah. I'm not going to go deep into this, but is anyone familiar with the golden ratio, Fibonacci scale?
Yes.
If you don't know of it, this is a rabbit hole that you can go down in YouTube, and it's super cool stuff. And so, literally everything in the world is based off of what is the right scale. If you're trying to scale things correctly, the Fibonacci sequence or Fibonacci scale is 1 to 1.6. And every single thing in life, down our DNA strands are that scaled. Our human proportions of our body, like the distance from our elbow to our hand is 1.6, and then our elbow to our shoulder is 1, and it goes down to the fingers, it goes to everything. Our eyes, our faces are put together is completely that same scale. It goes to the weather patterns, to the seeds in a fruit, to the spirals of a galaxy. I mean, it's wild. It's just God's handiwork of how he used. That's the sequence that God used. So if you use the same sequence God used to get a good scale, you're probably pretty safe. So it's really cool. So when you have time and you don't know what to do, look up Fibonacci sequence, and it's cool stuff. So. All right, we're going to have a short exercise to do just now. So for about 10 or 15 minutes. What time is it? 7:30. About 10 minutes. I've got in your book, I think page 55, there are 2 boxes, and just want you to sketch something that shows the idea of symmetrical balance. If it were spelled right, that would be better. It's on a plane. and something in the symmetrical balance, you're going to have a center line, and then you're going to have left and right side are mirrored off each other. So that shows the understanding of symmetry. And the second one, you'll have asymmetrical balance, where you've got the basically the tic-tac-toe grid, and you're putting interest points and features on those opposite edges and corners, or the points and counterpoints of that. But also show where your viewpoint location is, where you're going to be viewing it. And then think through, do I have depth in this space? Do I have a foreground, a midground, and a background element? So when you start combining these things, the sight line that's coming out the house, down a viewpoint or over a viewpoint, you start combining the symmetrical or asymmetrical line with the where you're viewing it from, and with foreground, midground, background, and you scale it, you're there. I mean, your design is going to be solid. You've created the skeleton that then you have the background now, or the base, to start doing the stuff we're going to talk about next, which is the fun elements, where you're literally putting, you're playing with people's minds when you can compare and contrast and create emphasis points and rhythm and movement and unity and integration. Those are all the next things we'll talk about. So we'll take a break for a moment, for let's say 15 minutes, and then let's say do this project and a break. We'll say it's 20 minutes. So it's 7:40 my time. So 40 hours. So at 8, we'll pick back up, but play with it, do some drawing on that, take a minute, and then we'll pick back up with the next set. So.
Anybody have any questions at all about what we just talked about? Any comments?
No, it's actually that lesson 4 is one of the harder pieces of all. The rest of it then gets to be kind of gravy after that. But if you master that, you are on your way.